on, guys? It's been a little while since I've done any tutorial videos. I've been busy with some other things, but today we're going to be getting back into it. I plan on putting these out every week. If you've been following my channel, you'll also notice that I've also put some podcasts as well. I've been doing those recently. That's what's been filling up the dead air on my channel lately. And if you're an artist and you're looking for inspiration, please go and check out the podcast it is that I have. I have interviews with different writers and artists, and we're all talking about what it is that it takes to succeed as an artist and how to improve. And in this tutorial series, in this episode today, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be looking at the work of Greg Capullo, one of my favorite artists, one of my favorite comic book artists, and we're going to break down and talk about a couple of different things that make his comic book covers look so cool. What is it about his covers that make it so dynamic and interesting to look at and really visually appealing? So if you've watched any of my tutorial series before, you know the first thing I'm going to say is that they have a very strong read. When I zoom out, we can still make out what these images are. We can see that they are Spawn covers. We even see that the text itself of the title gets moved around a little bit depending upon what other elements are in the picture. Another thing it is that you'll notice is that there's a lot of swooping lines that he likes to use, right? And everything has a very strong silhouette. So by that I mean we look at this shadow shape here, and we can basically say that this is one big arrow that's pointing us from the left side of the page, almost as if we're reading it, and it's pointing us towards this protagonist character, right? And then we're seeing that this shadow shape of the cape is directly connecting with the shadow shape of the figure itself. It connects with the top of his cape, and then it connects with his face as well, which is an important thing, and it's something that you'll see a lot with good illustrators that know what they're doing, is that they like to group their things together, like to group like with like. It makes it feel organized, right? Another thing it is that you'll notice is that it's a very dynamic pose, right? He's not standing straight. He's leaning towards this whatever this thing is that he's standing on, this pile of dead bodies and rubbish. I'm not exactly sure what the story is here, but there's a clear pose going on here, and it's very much a silhouette, right? Everything is very distinguished. You can see the side of his face. You can see the arch in his back and the way that his other hand goes backwards behind his body. This is something that's very important. And then we have like these leading lines down here in the form of these people that are reaching upwards, right? They're reaching up, and they're essentially pointing towards the lines that are leading us to Spawn. And keeping with the theme of other things it is that I always mention in these videos is that there's a good balance between the different elements. And by that I mean there's big shapes, and then there's medium shapes, and then there's little shapes, right? And we can see that represented in the musculature of Spawn himself, but we also see that in the different shapes it is that he uses in the background. You know, we have him, this big silhouetted figure, but then in the background we have bats that are flying around back here, right? And then we also have this very static image, or this very static shape, rather, in the form of a sun that contrasts against the very angular and dynamic shapes of the figure itself. So this gives it a point of comparison, right? You have this very static object of the sun sitting in the sky, and then you have this very dynamic shot of Spawn looking like he's about to leap off of this pile of rubbish and dead bodies, right? So that's some of the things we can notice about that in particular. Now this next one, what's interesting about this, and there's other images that I could pull up and use as an example of him doing the same thing, but what he likes to do with some of these covers is he likes to black out things around the figure, right? So if we look at it like this, we can see that there is a very strong silhouette of light that is covering the figure, right? This figure is held within this light shape, and everything else is in total black. And he even works the black into the shapes of these rocks that sit behind him, right? And that's an important thing to realize, because when we look at it from a distance, we see that it creates a very dynamic shape. It's very diagonal. It's coming from the top left, again, almost as if we're reading it, and then it's going downward almost to the other side of the page, but then he goes back downwards. And what's significant about that is that he's not leading you off of the page. He's bringing you back to Spawn. In Spawn, we have all these looping lines that all take us up. They're all in this very light red color with a strong lighting that's coming from the right side as well as the top left. So he's hitting you with light on both sides of the figure, here and here. And we have this character's face. We have Spawn's face. And we only get a hint of it, right? And we see the black silhouette of the hand here that is standing in front of the character's face. So, what is the significance of the way he's organized these shapes? Well, if you just take the black shapes themselves and you organize those into pairs, you see pretty clearly that he puts a black shape, a dark shape like this hand with the cross. He puts this on a light background, which is basically Spawn, and then he puts Spawn's black head, his dark head, his head that's hidden in shadow. He puts it on a light background, so you have this light background here. This is an interesting design here because it breaks up the monotony of if this was just a brick wall. And so it makes it feel like this is like maybe the side of a cathedral or something. And it seems to go right in line with this theme that he's exploring here with the figure in the foreground holding the cross. So there's a clear pairing of a black shape on a light background or a light shape on a black background, right? This is like very basic ways of like grouping and organizing your values. That's something it is that you always want to make sure that you think about. So that's Greg Capullo's work. Now I have another artist here that I just want to take a quick look at, and I'm going to go ahead and pull up his work just to show another principle. I'm not exactly sure who this is. If you know who this is, please drop him in the link below. I guess his name starts with a K. I'm not exactly sure. But let's go ahead and let's break this down now. Now, what's interesting about this, and it's something that you see in a lot of comic covers, is that there is a strong forced perspective and there's a strong use of forced perspective and a strong use of like dynamic angles. And by that I mean whenever we draw a figure, we don't want to draw him just like this, right? It's boring. It's not interesting. We want some tilt to him. And so if we were to do a quick study of Cable here, we're seeing him do something like this, right? And he's got this over here. The shoulder one shoulder is slightly up, so we look here, one shoulder is slightly up, the one that's pointing towards us, and then we have the foreshortening that leads us to the drawing itself, right? And so he's not pointing directly at us, so it's not a boring pose. And then we can see the figure is pointed out this way, right? And then in order to add an even greater sense of dynamicism, we have the next character who's even in an even more forced perspective, which makes sense because he's closer to us. Deathlock, he's closer to us, and we see that he's pointing in the opposite direction, and we have this same dynamic going on here. The head's at a tilt. The shoulder is not perfectly lined up, and the arm is thrown back, and his body is pointed in the opposite direction with his knee pointed in the opposite direction, right? So we get this interesting, like we could almost draw a through line here. And we can also see these cables are going up, which is connecting us to the cable figure again. And we have these lines coming out. So if we turn this off, we can kind of see how it is that these angles play off of one another. Actually, let's go back and turn that back on. If I was to trace this out, just do a quick trace out. So we can see very clearly, now that we have the actual figures hidden, that there is an element of dynamicism going on here, right? Sometimes in order to see the principles better, it's easier to just do a quick draw over, and then you can kind of see how these elements are playing off of one another. All right, guys, thank you for checking out this video. I'll be posting up regular tutorials. I'm looking at every Thursday or every Wednesday, and I'll be making announcements on my community page as well with new tutorials, and I'll be just doing weekly breakdowns like this. I hope you guys found this to be useful. If you'd like to check out my comics or my illustration work, please check out the links in the description below, and feel free to reach out and let me know what you thought about this video. Thanks, guys. Take it easy.